Welcome to the Revenue Builders Podcast, a weekly show featuring B2B sales leaders and executives. Hosted by five-time CRO John McMahon and Force Management co-founder John Kaplan, the show goes behind the scenes with the people who have been there, done that, and seen the results. If you enjoy our content, please subscribe, rate, and review the show to help us reach more people. Revenue Builders is brought to you by Force Management. We help companies improve sales performance, executing the growth strategy at the point of sale. Find us at forcemanagement.com. Enjoy today's episode.
Welcome, everyone, to the Revenue Builders Podcast. I'm John McMahon, and my special guest today is Scott Sinatra. He started his career in sales at PTC and grew into sales management at PTC and then at DataLink. After DataLink, Scott was a GM at Mosier IT before joining BladeLogic. After BladeLogic was acquired, Scott became an area director at BMC before becoming the SVP of worldwide sales at Glassdoor. After Glassdoor, Scott became founding executive and VP of worldwide sales at Glint, which was acquired by LinkedIn. Today, we find Scott as the CEO and the co-founder of a new startup company named Bountiful, and he's joined at Bountiful by his co-founder, Nick Kirkus, the chief technology officer who's a former engineering leader at Zoom and Salesforce. Welcome, Scott Sinatra. How are you today?
Excellent, John. Great to be with you. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Good to see you again.
Yeah, you too.
Scott, so let's start by tell us a little bit about Bountiful. Are you still in stealth mode? Or let's talk about it a little.
Yeah, thanks. No, we've emerged from stealth. We have our product out in the world, in the wild, with customers using it now already. And we are a referral platform for recruiting. So most companies use employee referrals as a source for talent. It's often managed on spreadsheets, however. And also, when you use employee referrals as a source, you tend to build really homogeneous teams. I remember when I was at Glassdoor, in fact, 86% of all of our hiring was from employee referrals. But I also remember looking around the room and saying, "Oh my gosh, we all look the same." Fast forward 10 years now, and many organizations are looking to diversify their talent flow. And so we've built effectively a network effects business extending the employee referral program to enable anybody to refer anybody else into a job.
Right? So give me an example of exactly how that would work.
Yeah. So a customer will pay to place a position or jobs on our platform. They place a bounty on the position, and anybody can register to become a scout, a talent scout, if you will, for that position. So we all have people in our networks we know can be great for jobs. So we're helping scouts or people like you and I monetize the relationships we have in our networks. So we can refer people into these jobs. If somebody gets hired from that referral, the scout gets paid.
And the bounty, it sounds like that might change based upon the difficulty to hire that in that position. Is that right?
Yeah, it's really up to the customer to decide how much bounty they're willing to pay or want to pay. We've seen anywhere from $1,000 bounty to a $25,000 bounty.
Wow.
Depending on the criticality of the position, the seniority of the position, the difficulty in hiring the position. The bottom line here is referrals are a great source, and what the inspiration for Bountiful is that, we can make it even better. And this idea that network effects businesses can really propel an opportunity to make things way better, way broader, and universal creates a really interesting opportunity for Bountiful, for sure.
And you're going after the HR departments or like recruiting departments within HR?
Yeah, CHRO, head of HR, and the head of talent is typically our kind of buying persona right now.
And do you collect a fee from the bounty, or how do you make money?
It's a subscription service. So we're a SaaS model. So customers are paying us for access to the platform. Right now we have an unlimited campaign threshold, so any customers can join and give us as many jobs as they'd like. And they're buying this opportunity for this kind of network effects to take place, but also workflow automation. One of the challenges with current programs is it's often managed on spreadsheets. It's often managed manually. And so there's no software that's managing the end-to-end processing of referrals for companies. It's a pain point. And especially, talent teams have to be far more efficient today than ever before. And so we can maximize the efficiency of those teams for sure.
You ever get conflicts where there's a position and three people say, I know the same person for that position?
Not yet. That'd be a great problem to have, though.
That's going to happen. I guess they're splitting the bounty.
Yeah. Well, we actually can. We are at the level of what's called multi-touch attribution. So we know the multiple hops that a candidate can take through these different networks. And so we're engineering an opportunity to create actually multiple payment points across, that Scout continuum.
It sounds really exciting. I mean, it sounds so logical. You kind of wonder why somebody hadn't thought of it before. So Congratulations. Sounds great.
Thank you. Yeah, we're really excited about it.
Hey, Scott, what I want to do is talk about RFPs. Okay, so let's go back to the BladeLogic days to discuss an RFP, because you have a very memorable learning experience responding to an RFP. And this experience of yours, I think, could be extremely valuable for so many people that are having to respond to RFPs. So let me try to set the situation. There was a very large company in your territory. Actually, I think it was the largest account in your territory, right?
It was a must win. Let's just put it that way.
Okay, I was going to get to that. And it was such a large name that it was a must win. And the reason is because you felt like it would have a ripple effect. Like if I won this account or lost this account, it would ripple through my territory, right? So
absolutely.
I think you were in the sales process. You were doing discovery, doing things like scoping. You're trying to build champions. You did, I think you did a number of demos and presentations to try to influence the eventual decision criteria. And then they sent out an RFP. So let's talk about what you were doing. And did you know they were going to send out an RFP, and when they sent that RFP out, when you were in, your sales process?
We were an emerging technology at that time, so we were doing a lot of evangelizing.
That's putting it nicely.
Yeah. Yeah. So we were really commercial teachers. We were commercially teaching IT organizations on the benefits and power of automation, at that level. And so for the first, 4 months or so of my interaction with this particular company, it was all about education. It was all about meetings and kind of trying to extract pain and trying to understand, their mentality. And so we spent a lot of time, with this team educating, doing demos, sharing. Gartner had actually come out with a report talking about this emerging space, gave the account a bit of confidence that this is something to invest some time into. And so really my goal was to educate to the point where we could get them to fund an initiative. And that's what we set out to do.
And so you were going down the sales process. So you did some demos probably of the product. You did some presentations of what the product could do, right? Because you said you were evangelizing. Now, if I remember right, they formed a committee, and that might have happened while you were in your sales process, right? Because sounds like you started to do a pretty good job evangelizing. Gartner comes in, says this could be a real space. Now these guys this company forms a committee, right?
Yeah, the committee formed after they decided to fund an initiative to investigate and to purchase a product in that space. We had a couple of competitors at the time, so the committee was formed, but the committee was really most of the same people that we'd been educating anyway. which was helpful, obviously. So they just were able to get funding for a particular IT initiative to try the solution again.
Yeah. Did you know they were going to send out an RFP?
No, my hope was we could sole source it, but of course that doesn't work out every time. And it's such a large organization. Yeah, it's such a large organization, and procurement there was pretty well known for tightening down the hatches, on any sort of sales process. And so, we kind of we saw the writing on the wall that this was going to be a formalized thing once they put some money behind an initiative.
Yeah. Now, so they send the RFP out, and what'd you discover when you read the RFP?
We didn't write it.
We didn't write it. The committee wrote it, right? So you had some influence, right? But
yeah,
the RFP honestly was not really, aligned with what you would prefer to be the decision criteria, especially since they were going to go do, part of the RFP said you're going to go do a POV also, right?
Right. Yeah. So when we found out that they were going to send an RFP, I went straight to a few of the people on that committee to say, hey, I have a test plan template that I can provide to you if that would be helpful to put into the RFP, right? So we could save you 30 to 60 days of effort and time. So I gave him this test plan that we had written as a company to say, this is the kind of steps and decision criteria that a customer can use to select our solution. So I tried to embed our test plan into the RFP process, before this became uber formalized, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when we received the RFP, I was expecting to see some of our test plan in the RFP.
Right.
And I was saddened to see that it was became far more generalized. It was like more kind of the collective note taking of the committee and some of the things that they'd been learning over several months, not just with us, but through Gartner and through conversations with other vendors. And so I noticed immediately that a lot of our criteria and the way we wanted the criteria, was not in the RFP. So at that point, I was like, oh, man.
Yeah. So you think it was written without your differentiators because, well, one, it could be that the customer did not truly understand the power of your differentiators, or they were influenced by a competitor, or it sounds like it was generalized because it was written by a committee. If you had to pick one of those, which one would you pick?
I think it was generalized because it was written by a committee.
Yeah.
Yeah. They didn't know enough to know exactly how to kind of detail the exact solution and needs they were looking for. They just wanted something to automate an IT process at that point. So
you think that they truly didn't understand their real pain points?
I think that I think that's probably right. They didn't understand exactly what they were trying to solve for, but they saw this as a good idea. That's something that they could make use of, create some efficiencies, save them some money down the road, et cetera. Yeah.
That's interesting for a lot of salespeople that are listening, because a lot of times we just believe that the customer knows everything about their environment. They understand all their pain points. So therefore they clearly should understand exactly how your product and your differentiators will align to their issues and solve it, seamlessly. But a lot of times companies, they either don't have the time to take to truly understand what their issues are. And then even if they do that, they really don't have the knowledge of your product and your differentiators and how they might solve those issues for them. So, okay, so you discover this RFP is watered down, let's call it, and it's not in your favor. What did you do?
Well, so as I read it and assessed what was happening, it was just like we mentioned, it was like basic and it lacked detail. And so I wanted it to be way more detailed, right? in terms of the decision criteria for them to make a decision.
Now, let me stop you right there before you say something, because I think if I remember right, once the RFP came out, correct me if I'm wrong, the purchasing or someone essentially placed a gag order on the committee saying, you, Mr. Committee, Mr. and Mrs. Committee, are not allowed to talk to any salespeople since this RFP was released. Is that correct?
Yeah. There was a total gag order. In fact, they had us as a vendor, right, sign into a portal. All communication was through the portal, right? Any sort of conversations outside of the portal resulted in a hand slap, and I did get my hand slapped. I tried. And so learned a little bit of a lesson there, just in terms of their rigor around compliance to a process. But I was thinking back, John, and that RFP was so generalized, and a rep, right? In many situations, who is trying to work the biggest account in their territory, might just be like, this is the way it is, and I'm just going to have to rely on my engineering team to dazzle them, right, when it comes down to showing the product, and make this an engineering versus engineering team cage match, if you will. And as we've learned, that is just not a great approach. Mm-hmm. So what did I do? All right.
What did you do, Scott?
Yeah. So I was like, I this is not set up for success. I can go down this road, and I can smoke hopium, is what I call it.
Yes.
Hoping that, we can show well, or I can try to change the game. And so what I did is I called you, and you remember this. I called you and I said, John, here's the situation. I said, we've been educating this account for months. It's an important account for us to get in the territory. I don't know who my champions are. I've had a really hard time, right, identifying who is going to do our selling for us, and we're not there. The RFP is general. It doesn't contain our test criteria, and you gave me some of the best advice I've ever received in my sales career. You took a deep breath, took a step back, and you said, we had a choice to make. We can either play by somebody else's rules, or we can change the game. And for us to win, the criteria had to change. We knew that. And so, to make things harder, as I mentioned, we didn't have a champion that I knew of. So your advice to me was to walk away.
Right.
From the biggest account.
Immediately
from the biggest account in my territory.
That's not the reason I called you, John. That's not what I want to hear.
No, this is not what I was hoping to get out of this conversation. And but you explained yourself. And you said either they're going to say goodbye, and if they say goodbye, you weren't going to win anyway. You had no chance. Or they're going to try to keep you in. And if they're trying to keep you in, there's something with the solution, right, that maps to the pain and maps to them solving a problem.
You're saying I've got a chance. You're saying there's a chance.
Saying I got a chance, exactly. So you and I decided together on how to do this, and we came to the conclusion that because this was a formal process, and because I had to do this thing through this portal, that we'd write a letter. So I wrote a letter to the committee, and I basically said, hey, if this is the criteria you're going to use to make a decision, we're gonna respectfully decline to participate.
But let's add some color to that. It was a very professional. You wrote a very professional, business-like letter. With all due respect to the company and to the committee and all the effort that they've put in. It wasn't just like, if you don't like it, we're out. It was, you wrote a very professional letter.
Yes, that's true. And then I spent probably 30 minutes looking at that letter, waiting to hit the send button. I was like, what
Only
am I
30
doing?
minutes? Only 30? Yeah.
Yeah, right. Only 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So I hit the send button, and lo and behold, several hours later, I received two phone calls, actually, not one, but two phone calls from two people on the committee. So they actually went around procurement, called me, and basically said, what are you doing? We need you in the process. We like you, right? What's going on? And so I explained to them, I said, we'd like to see a little bit, harder line on the decision criteria for the decision, the shopping list of things that you're going to need to solve your problem. I gave you a test plan. It's mapped really well to our solution, but in general, it will work for a lot of solutions to solve your problem. I said, so the test plan is a really good way to get more detailed in your RFP. And if you can use that, the criteria that's set in that test plan, I'll be happy to participate.
Yeah, just the fact that they, couple committee members went around, purchasing and called you was huge sign that they wanted you, and they know, and that since they were a committee and since they had a gag order on them, just the fact that they would call you and speak to you at all said you had whatever they were giving you, they had a lot more. That's really what it told us, right?
Yep. It also flushed out, right, some influencers or, champions, if you will, which I didn't know that we had. And so it was a real test, I looked at that as a test, and it definitely flushed out people that were going to be rooting for us in the process, and they were willing to go to bat to make the changes necessary to get us in there, which was great.
So that must have made you think, when those couple people called you, must have made you like look back on your interactions with them and realize how close to the chest they held their cards.
I remember for that 4 months of education with that team, I kept walking out of those meetings like, man, like the radar is always on, for who can be our champion, right? Who has the power and the influence and the willingness and the ability to do it. I walked out of every single one of those meetings like, man, I don't know who it is. I cannot, for the life of me. They were stoic. It was like one of those things where, I feed on emotion in a room. I couldn't get it. And, it was driving me kind of crazy, actually. And so, the RFP comes out. I don't know if we have one. We used this strategy, and we were able to flush a couple people out that now we're willing to step up, which is great.
Okay, so now you're speaking to them a little bit. You told them that you have already presented them with this, I can't remember what you just called it, that they could, this matrix that they could incorporate into their test plan.
Yeah.
And what happened? What did they do?
So we get an addendum from the portal. We as vendors, so procurement, decides to create an addendum to the plan. And they added a bit more detail in terms of the things that the company was looking for to solve the problem, as part of the RFP response. So I thought that was really interesting. There's a change now in this process.
They're coming your way, but if I remember right, when you looked at it, you didn't feel like they made enough changes that you were feeling very comfortable about participating. Isn't that correct?
Yeah. So we get the addendum from procurement, and I read it, and it still isn't right. It's not perfect. And we knew that our competition was going to be able to do some smoke and mirror kind of activity, behind the scenes to try to make their solution work if the test criteria was generalized. We knew exactly, right, the steps, the sequence of events that needed to happen for us to win. And it just didn't say that in the RFP, right, to the point that I was comfortable. And so what did I do?
What did you do?
I wrote another letter.
You did? So that part I don't remember. Go ahead, tell me about it.
I wrote another letter. And very professional, we really appreciate the time, but if this is the criteria you're going to use to make a decision, we're going to respectfully decline to participate further.
Wow.
And I spent another 30 minutes considering whether I should send that letter.
That was after a sleepless night.
Biggest account in the territory, $1 million deal on the line.
Yeah.
And so I hit send. Several hours later, I get a call, and one particular guy is like, "Dude, you are killing us." I'm like, guys,
these are all amazing signs. Just the fact that they're picking up the phone and calling you when they have a gag order.
It was great.
They could get in trouble. It just says a lot, right?
It was great. And so they said, "Dude, you're killing us. And what are you doing? And what's going on?" And I said, "It's not right. It's not perfect. Please get in the RFP exactly, the sequence of events, the things that need to happen on that criteria list, on that matrix. And if that can happen, right, we're going to win, and you're going to win, and we're all going to be high-fiving at the end of this." And they're like, "Okay."
Now, when did you decide that they had made enough changes that you could stop pushing and move forward with finalizing the RFP and potentially moving towards a POV?
We got a second addendum from the procurement team through that RFP portal. Now with the changes that reflected what I wanted as far as the decision criteria goes, and at that point, it was like, this thing is set up for success. If we've written that test criteria, that test plan, right, effectively, there's no way we can lose.
I also think, if I remember right, you and I had spoken again, and we felt like that was enough. Like, we really couldn't push these people anymore. That was we were like right on the line.
We were definitely on the line.
Right? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. We were on the line. So
all right. So now you're gonna get ready to do the POV?
Yep.
Okay. And when you're in the room now with the committee, you probably haven't actually seen them since the RFP came out.
Yeah.
Did you get any, verbal signals, nonverbal clues that you were doing the right thing by performing the POV? What did you, when you walked in the room and saw the people, like, what would your stomach say? What'd your intuition say?
Good. Yeah. My intuition was telling me that all we had to do was perform according to plan, and we were going to win. They also validated for me during that week that we did the test that the competition was going to really struggle to actually finish the test plan.
They told you that explicitly?
Yeah, they told me that. Yeah. And so I came out of there with a lot of confidence that, we did what we said we were going to do as written, in the RFP process. And at that point, I actually, John, felt like we had an opportunity to sole source this deal.
Okay, let me I want to go back just a little bit there. So did you do anything special during the POV to highlight or educate the customer on some of the differentiators that the committee did not originally have in the RFP, and you put in the RFP, or you needed to have essentially in the RFP? Did you do any of that during the POV?
Yeah, I did a lot of explaining, of course, me and the team, right? This is a team sport. So
sure.
The engineering team that was with us. And we did a lot of explanation in terms of why we had to do things in the sequence of events we were doing them. And we did that to expose actually our competition's weaknesses. We were explaining that, you're not going to have to do a lot of custom coding with our solution, to make it work. However, you're going to see, when other vendors try to comply to this test plan, that they're going to have to do a lot of coding on the side or behind the curtain to make the solution look good for you during this test. And so we kept kind of feeding that kind of information to them during the POV, to the point where they're like, this has become kind of a no-brainer. You guys are satisfying the test plan. You are meeting the needs of us as a committee to help, perform against the solution we funded against. We got a lot of validation during that week, which was great. Certainly
So
helped.
when you walked out, did you feel like, I'm going to win this thing, or you felt like I had a high probability of winning or a 50% chance of winning? How'd you feel?
I felt like we had a high probability of winning. The next thing that was on my mind was a desperate vendor trying to buy the business or steal the business through some sort of a pricing, kind of a deal. But that never actually came to fruition. In fact, the two other vendors that had elected to participate in the plan, one of them actually declined to participate. They just
wow,
yeah,
great,
we locked them out.
Great. Now, do you think you would have had any chance of winning this business if you didn't professionally pull out of the RFP?
No.
And why do you say that so adamantly?
Knowing what I know now, it would have been, maybe no is a very strong word, but it would have been left to engineering teams doing the magic behind the scenes to show well.
Yes, it was a crapshoot.
It was a crapshoot, yeah. And I looking back, surely, and then since then, I wanted some assurances that we had a great chance of winning if we could get decision criteria established the way we needed it.
So, what were some of the biggest lessons you learned that are now, in your DNA as far as thinking about RFPs?
One, no champ, no deal.
Yeah.
It might sound obvious, but our job as salespeople is to develop, champions. You have to identify them first. And I was really challenged in identifying who those people or that person could be on that committee. And if you don't know, that's a yellow light. You need, do not pass through yellow lights. That is something that needs to, cause you to pause and try to flush them out if you can.
Now, Scott,
really
I'm sorry, buddy. I thought you were done with that.
No,
go ahead.
No, it's just really important that you have to have somebody selling for you when you're not there. That has the influence to do that.
Now, I'm just really curious. Did you when you look back, did you wind up having one champion or two champions in that room?
I had one primary that had the influence and some coaches.
Wow, great.
Yeah.
And what about?
So no champ, no deal. Secondly, I would say is understand how to set decision criteria. The shopping list of capabilities required to solve pain is fundamental, right? You need to be trained as a salesperson to know your products and services really well, and also your competition's products and services really well, so that you can differentiate. Really important to establish decision criteria and help the customer, with that shopping list of features and benefits in your solution, right? That maps to pain. That's just, I've always said, as far as Medic goes, for me, decision criteria is the one. If you can build the decision criteria in your favor, it's really hard to lose.
Yeah, right. And you got to control it, to your point, with the champion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'd say finally, training, I just mentioned it, but training matters. We have to understand ourselves. We have to understand our competition better than they know themselves. And we would not have won that deal. I don't think we would have won that deal if we didn't know the details of how to beat the competition. And that was trained in us. You helped us with that significantly. And that has certainly stayed with me for all these years afterwards. It's been great.
Let's talk now just in general terms for the listeners, like in terms of responding to RFPs, what are some lessons or comments that you would think about on, in general terms of an RFP that you need to think about? Like an RFP comes out, sales rep looks at it. What do they have to first think about?
You have to think about, one, if you didn't write it, who did?
Right.
Somebody did.
Somebody wrote it. Now, in your experience now, how many times does a committee write it versus another competitive salesperson?
That's actually hard for me to answer, because committees are taking their cues from all sorts of information sources.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think in today's sale, there's so much public information available to committees and buyers, more so today than ever before, that they can start to form opinions without ever talking to you or your competitor.
Well, that's a really good point. Really good point. Yeah.
But that said, we as salespeople, our job is to get that, get them thinking about our solution versus somebody else. And so you're always thinking, I've always thought anyway, that we didn't write it, somebody else did. Now, who that somebody else is, not exactly sure. Sometimes there are tells, certainly if we know our competition well. But certainly you need to understand that. If you didn't write
chances are, if we didn't write it, then our differentiators are not in it. So we have to have an opportunity to change the criteria, or it would be crazy to try and play. Right. Unless you're bold enough to do what Scott Sinatra did with the biggest account in his territory.
Even, John, I was, CRO at Glint, or head of sales at Glint, and we would get inbound RFPs, fairly often.
Right.
And my job really was to look at those and decide if we were going to participate in those or not. And if we didn't have any sort of influence on the criteria, we either had to, pause and see if we can change the criteria, or decide, not to participate. And we did a little bit of both, actually.
And when you were doing that, were you looking at whether or not it aligned to your ideal customer profile, along with the differentiators or the problem or use case inside the RFP?
100%. Yeah. I have two examples, actually, if you want me to share stories.
Oh, yeah. Love stories.
So what we received this RFP from an IT consulting organization that has 250,000 employees. We were pricing our product on number of employees. Our biggest customer at that point in our life cycle as a company was, 10% of that size of a company. So we didn't know if we could support somebody that big, right? So we get this RFP out of the blue. I read it. It's like similar to the use case, the story we've been telling during this conversation. It was very generalized. It was hard to tell who was writing it. A lot of consulting companies in there, et cetera. And so I was like, man, this is a little bit out of our zone, right? This is way outside of our ICP. Let's decide not to spend the next 3 months, pursuing this one. And so I wrote them, a nice note again. And I said, hey, if this is the criteria you're going to use to make a decision, we really appreciate the opportunity, but, we're going to have to decline to participate. Funny enough, I received a phone call.
Hey.
Shortly thereafter.
These letters start to work. They seem to work.
This time it wasn't the customer that was calling me. It was an HR analyst that had been a friend of the company.
Okay.
And he's a major influencer in the HR world. And he called and said, what are you guys doing? You can't leave this RFP. And I was like, okay. Sounds like we have somebody in there doing some work for us on our behalf. So, and they listen to this person, right? So long story short, we answered the RFP. We were able to get the criteria changed. Many meetings, flushing out the same kind of story, flushing out champions, getting the criteria the way we needed it, and ultimately won the deal.
Wow,
which was really cool.
Congratulations!
Thank you. I got another one too from a very well-known company who sent us an RFP. that was written as if we wrote it. It was like perfect. But we had no influence over it, which was really interesting. We had not.
How do you think that happened? Is it going back to what you said that today? A lot of companies can go and do a lot of homework on your company.
I think that's exactly right. And it made me feel really good that the pain we were solving was the pain customers were feeling. And in this case, they expressed it in their RFP to the point where, as like I said, we could have written it. I will tell you though, that process, there was 25 vendors in that process. They invited 25 companies to participate.
But when you saw that it was basically written for you, then if you're a competitor, you have to believe that, Glint was going to win that deal.
You would think, but they got 25 responses of people saying, we would love to have you as a company. We like your logo. We're willing to smoke the hopium, right, to try to win this thing.
Right.
And the cream rises to the top in these scenarios pretty fast. And so, they worked that 25, those 25 vendors down to 5 pretty quickly, then to 3. And then, we became a finalist and ultimately won it.
Good story.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes if you're playing with, the company that was 250,000 people or employees, I've seen in some RFPs where there's really unfavorable terms and conditions because purchasing might put stuff in there to essentially lock a small company out because they'll put in IP transfers, payment delays, and other types of, contractual aspects that just make the deal a lot less attractive. So sometimes, you might be able to win the deal, but then you're really sad that you actually have the deal, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Yeah. What else have you seen as far as things that people should think about as far as, when they get an RFP?
Well, John, to that point though, let me jump in on that because I've seen that before. Some RFPs come into the company and that organization actually wants you to be a kind of a custom engineering shop for them. And that's a danger signal big time, right?
Yes.
You have to be building products and services that meet the masses, not the needs of a client. And as big as that company might be and as attractive as that logo might be, you cannot put your company or your engineering team in that position to be a custom app shop, for somebody like that. You have to be able to flush that out. You have to understand that.
Yeah.
I've seen it.
Yeah. I mean, also, if you have never been calling on an account, in your case, you had, with the 250,000 employee company, you essentially had an internal salesperson that was was an outside consultant. And in the other one, where they wrote the RFP for you, essentially, that means you had some sort of potential champion already in that account. But if I've never called on the account and it comes out and it's written for the competition, it's going to be really difficult for me to play. What do you think about that? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think you need to make a go, no-go decision on those really fast. If you have no opportunity to influence the criteria, then you shouldn't play.
Yeah. The other thing, too, that people have to realize is that responding to an RFP and then going and do a POV that could last, in some cases, days or weeks, that's really high opportunity cost. It's high risk. And the probability of winning are really low. So it might be a lot smarter to go play someplace else, right?
I've always thought that, again, this is a team sport. I'm the quarterback on, if I'm an IC, I'm the quarterback in an account. But I've got a team, that wants the confidence to work with me on deals. And if I'm putting them in the position, right, to be successful, putting them in a position so where they're not wasting their time, I'm establishing credibility with my ecosystem with the moves that I'm making to make sure that this account or this deal is set up right for a high probability of success. So
That's a really good point. Very good point.
So I encourage, younger salespeople and lesser experienced salespeople to think about that a lot. You've got a team of people that are relying on you, and if you manage a sales process with the idea that you're going to make them successful, they're going to appreciate that a lot. You're going to build a lot of internal credibility with those teams, and when you ask them to do something, they're definitely going to be more apt to want to help you.
Yeah, very good point. Let's transition a little, unless you have anything else you want to talk about on RFPs.
We could talk all day long about RFPs, but yeah.
I got to say, after those 2 stories you just told me about Glenn, you're a pretty lucky guy with some of these RFPs, Scott Sinatra.
You make your own luck, John.
Yeah, you do. That's very, very true. Let's talk about, you're now a CEO, right? You had to make the transition from CRO to CEO. And even when you made the transition to CRO, you started to realize, oh my God, there's a lot more to this job than I thought. And there's a lot more things that fall on my desk. And now you're going from CRO to CEO. Talk a little bit about some of the things that, you're facing in that transition, or you did face in that transition.
It's been an incredible transition for me, actually. So, when you're a head of a department, it's pretty easy to kind of sit in your own swim lane and worry about your own metrics, and you'll worry about your own, performance, relative to the business, et cetera. And you can get caught up in that, actually. Even though you're on the executive team, et cetera, you've got a job to do and a specific function to manage and run. As I've transitioned into the top job, for the company I helped start, it's been incredible for me, because now I am way more in tune with product. I'm way more in tune with helping Nick, drive product decisions. Nick, my co-founder. I am founder selling. I'm the salesperson for the company.
Right.
I'm worried about marketing and brand. I'm worried about investor relations. So everything comes to me right now, and I absolutely love it. The diversification of my job right now is something I've actually been longing for, and feel like I'm in a really good spot. But it's pulled me out of just being the sales guy, right, and into being the business guy. And I've learned a ton already, and will continue to learn a ton. I've got fantastic investors that are great coaches and mentors and teachers to me, and I've been able to get a lot of advice from a lot of really brilliant people, and that's always helpful. But it's been a bit natural for me. I've always, when I was leading sales organizations, I was always thinking about, kind of the business impact of the decisions that I was making. Now, that transition's just become natural for me.
Yeah. And at this stage of your company, because it's still a young company, I find that whether you're the CEO or the CRO, just in my experience of watching other companies, that you're also a product manager.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's been fun for me. It's not something I've done before, actually. As a CRO, I get to, tell the product team, hey, this is what customers saying they want or need. Oftentimes, the motivation for that is that I want you to build something I can sell, right?
Right, of course.
Now I'm thinking about, actually, what can we build that's sustainable, that's actually, can help this company not only in the short term, but in the long term, meet the needs of a big, mass variety of types of customers. And so my perspective has changed for sure.
Yeah. Also put some, what you're referring to, I think, is putting distance between you and competitors that if they're not there now, they're going to come.
Exactly.
Right.
No question.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been fun.
It's awesome, Scott Sinatra. I'm really happy for you.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for doing this.
My pleasure. It's always great to talk with you. Are you kidding me? Look, I've learned so much from you, and you've been an incredible mentor to me, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to have gotten to know you, to have been coached by you. The lessons I've learned, in your organizations have helped me for sure in my career and my life, and I can't thank you enough.
Yeah, thank you. Hey, you staying in shape with this job?
I'm doing the best I can. I'm not doing triathlon anymore, but
you're not.
I'm staying active. No, I'm staying active.
You still doing a little running or riding or swimming or?
None of the above. A little tennis,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Pickleball?
I played pickleball yesterday, in fact. Picking it up.
Exploding sport.
It's crazy. Yeah, it's actually pretty fun.
Yeah.
I'm trying to stay active, John. When I was living in Europe, I lived in Europe and in Asia for 5 years, not too long ago. And all the travel and all of that, it was really, really hard to prioritize.
The distances and when you travel in Asia are just so huge, even compared to the United States. It's crazy. So.
Exactly.
Well, Scott, thanks again. Really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone for listening to another episode of the Revenue Builders Podcast.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Be sure to check us out at forcemanagement.com.